Alright, what is up YouTube? So I am working on a video game, and today I am going to tell you how to do player movement. So I have something set up. I'm following a textbook, but I'm not going to tell you what textbook it is because it is not important what textbook it is. So here we go. So first we're going to create 3 folders inside this scene. So you want to set up your project like this. And again, we're just setting up the player movement in this video tutorial. So here we have materials, prefabs, which will be used later, and we have scripts. So materials is what you apply to a game object to make it look different. It applies texture and color to the game object. Prefabs we will get into later, and scripts is where we put our code. So here we go. We are then going to rename this sample scene to main. And then so up here we're going to go to game object, and we're going to go to 3D we're going to go to game object, 3D object, and we are going to select plane. Inside the plane, we're going to set the position over here in the inspector to 0, 0, 0, and then we are going to set the scale to 1000, 1, and 1000. So we have enough room to kind of see what we're working with. Okay, and then we are going to move on to actually creating the player object. So we're going to create a 3D, we are going to create empty first, and we are going to name this player. And then we are going to press Alt-Shift-N to create a child of that, and we are going to name it model. And then we need to ensure that the local position is set to 0, 0, 0, and this positions it exactly on the player object. And then we are going to right click the model object, and we are going to create 3D object, and we are going to select cube, and then we are going to name it base. Inside the base, we are going to set the local position to 0 for the X, 2.5 for the Y, so it is above the ground, and then 0 for the Z, and then we are going to set the scale to 1.4 for the X, 5 for the Y, and 1.4 for the Z. And then we are going to right click on the okay, and then an important thing to note here is that we set the local Y position half to the Y scale to keep the bottom of the cube at the pivot point instead of the center. The pivot point being the position of the player game object. So that basically keeps it above the ground and on the plane so you can move around it. And then we are going to create a second cube, this time the child of base. And so a cube, and we are going to name it top. Oh, we misspelled that, so we must go back in here, rename it, and go to top. Oh, again, I have my caps lock on, so we need to rename this top. And we are going to set its position to 0 for the Y, for the X, 0.5 for the Y, and 0 for the Z. And then we are going to set its scale to 0.33 for the X, 0.1 for the Y, and 0.7 for the Z. So that kind of creates this directional on it. So you see where we can kind of see where we're going and whatnot on the cube. So is that correct? 0.33, 0, oh, it's actually 0.5 for the Z. So now we have this, you can see which direction it is going into. And then after that, we want to take the main camera and drag it onto the player. So this kind of creates this third person perspective that we are going to be using. And we are going to set the local position for 0 for the X, 24 for the Y, so it is above it, and -5 for the Z, so it is behind it. And then we are going to set a rotation to 0 for the X, or no, 70 for the X, 0 for the Y, and 0 for the Z. So that positions the camera behind the player so we can move behind it. And then we need to go over here and we need to create 2 materials inside of our material folder. So we're going to go to right click, and we're going to go create, and then we need to select, where is it? we need to select a material. So material is right here under audio mixer inside of the folder, and then we have So first the folder section, 2 for the other ones, 3 for the 5th category. And we're going to create a base, and then we are going to create a material for the top. And so base, we come over here, and then the albedo, we select the albedo, so we double click inside the white thing, and we're going to select a pale yellow for the player base, and then we're going to select a pale blue for the top. And then we just take the material, we drag it, take the material, drag it and drop, and then we have that on top of our player object. And then after this, we're going to move on to these scripts. So we're going to create C# script, and we're going to name it player. Again, the player, it may not be important, but you want to name your script as the same exact thing as your object. So player, and your script must be the same. The script name must be the same thing as the script class. So then we're going to right click this, and we're going to open it inside of the class, and I'll open it in C#. So we're double clicking this, and we have this right here with this player.cs. And so we pretty much have these two scripts right here, and I already have this written out, so we're not going to write it, but I'm going to do it step by step so you understand kind of what's going on. So we have these two side by side, and so this is the completed script, and this is our empty script. So when you create this, you have the player class, and it's extended by mono behavior, and that's what basically gives you the start and update method. Start is called before the first frame update, and update is called once per frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste these references. These are the properties that we have within our player script. They are basically just the base thing. So we have these like header files and the tooltips, and then this kind of takes it, and you can change these inside of the inspector. So since you set this to 24, if you don't want to set it programmatically, since it's a tooltip and stuff like that, you can go inside of the inspector and actually select that. I'm not going to show that because I'm not prepared to show that. I would rather set it as like this, but here we have this. And so basically we have these this is the references. So this is where it's going to reference the player object, the model trans, the model object, and then the character controller that we're eventually going to set up. And then here are the properties where we have our movement. So our max movement speed is 24. Our time to max speed, which is kind of like a momentum variable, is 0.26f. And then we have velocity gained per second. That's just a basic calculation. So the time to max speed and the move speed, you want to do that, and that's how much you gain velocity perspective. And so basically this, and then we have like the reverse momentum multiplier, and eventually we have this movement velocity. So the important thing to note is that this is a vector 3. So we have movement velocity .x, movement velocity .y, and movement velocity .z. And we have to remember that the y-axis is up and down, and then left, right, up, left, north, east, southwest is decided between the x value. So here we have start. We're not going to use that, but right now we have this movement function, and so we call movement inside of the update, and that gets called once per second. Is called once per frame. It calls this movement function. And so the important thing to note here is that we are basically going to be, if you look at this, we have up and down movement first. So inside of this up and down movement, this is dictated by when we press key code W or key code S. So if you're pressing W or S, that's when you already do it. So if it basically is split up between two things. Are you already moving forward, or are you already moving back? Are we already moving forward, or if we're moving back or not moving at all? And then if we're not doing that, if we're moving up, if we're moving down. And so basically what it does is it uses these mins and max values to clamp it between our max movement speed and our minimum between our max movement speed, move speed, and 0. So it speeds us up and slows us down depending on which direction we're moving or if we're already moving. And so basically it's like, so basically this script is if either the W key or the up arrow key is held and the player currently has forward positive momentum or no momentum at all, then add to the forward momentum but never let it go higher than move speed. So here, if it's W and the player currently has positive forward momentum, then we are going to clamp it between these two values. So is movement speed or movement velocity point z plus velocity gain per second time time.delta time. So this time.delta time variable is basically how much time has passed between each frame. So that's what multiplies it and has us consistently moving per frame. And so and then another addendum to this is, and the player currently has backward negative momentum, increase and use the reverse momentum multiplier. Since the velocity is negative, we don't allow it to go over 0. This way, as soon as we hit 0 velocity, we stop using the reverse momentum multiplier. So that basically covers our z velocity. This is how we handle the movement velocity of z. And so then we have to then go into left and right movement. And so we do this. We're going to copy and paste this into here. And also realize that this is an if, else, if, else. So if W is key, else if S is keyed, and if we're already moving and there is nothing, so we have to slow. And this section is like, so do we have to stop moving? We let go of the key, so we need to stop, but it doesn't stop instantaneously. So that's kind of what that is. And then we are going to have the left-right movement. And with the left-right movement, again, it's the same basic concept with these mins, these maxes. So if we're already moving right and we want to go left, then we need to have the math max, and it's 0 movement speed. So this is velocity gain per second minus and stuff like that. So that's what helps us move and slow down. And so this handles our left-right movement. But that it's a little bit tricky because it's a little bit tricky. So let me just kind of break this down. So if either the S or the down arrow key is held and the player currently has forward positive momentum, then decrease forward momentum while applying reverse momentum multiplier, but never let it go lower than 0. Apply the reverse momentum multiplier, but never let it go lower than 0. So if we're moving in a certain direction and we don't want it to go 0, then that's how we handle it. And if the player currently has backward negative momentum or no movement momentum at all, decrease the momentum, but never let it go lower than negative movement speed. So the movement velocity, remember, this is a velocity, not a position. So it's how fast you're moving in that direction. It updates the position. And we're going to see that in this section right here with this. This is where we actually apply the movement. So every frame this gets called, and it says, okay, if you press D, update the movement velocity of X and Z in this area. And then what actually applies it is to this character controller, it calls the move method based on the movement velocity and supplies the movement. So the move method supplies the movement of a game object with an attached character controller component, and you supply a vector 3 of motion to it. And so it's the movement velocity time multiplied by the time/delta time, and it moves that much in that direction each time. And so how that actually gets called is basically keeping the model holder rotated towards the last movement direction. And so here we use this quaternion. And a quaternion is a data type that resembles a rotation. And the transform.rotation member is a quaternion coordinate that resembles a transform's current facing direction. So basically, we have this slurp method, and that kind of is what kind of, you know, does all that stuff. So that's the slurp, and if you see this, it spherically interpolates between coordinates A and B by ratio t. The parameter t is clamped to the range 0 to 1. A coordinate is spherically interpolated between coordinates A and B. So this slurp interpolates for you. It takes a vector, and this vector of 3, the model trans.rotation, rotation, the look rotation based on the movement velocity, and then this kind of like this. So basically, the slurp method can be used to move one value toward another by a fraction of the difference between those two values. That's what the slurp function does. So after that, we have finished our player script. So now we want to go back into here, and so we have this, and we want to apply our script to it. But okay, so this is actually not we're gonna have to alright, so we have reloaded our project, and that is going to allow us to apply this script to this player object. It's just a bug within Unity. I'm not really sure why that is, but so here we go. We have the inspector, and now we need to apply these different trans. So in the inspector, we need to set the references. So we need to set the player game object to the trans. We need to set the model to the model trans. And then with the character controller, we're going to have to, well, first we have to add this character controller. And so by doing that, we take this player, we drag and drop it onto it. Well, actually, we're going to have to, we have to actually add the component. And by doing that, we go to physics, we go to character controller, and then we have that as we do that. And we are then going to take this and apply it to the player object. Okay, so with that, there's actually something else that we need to do with this. So let me just kind of look that up for us right now real quick. I'm going to look in the book. I just want to make sure. Yes, so we want to set it to set the position to 0, 2.5, and 0. That's basically all we needed to do for that. That's just the center that we needed to set, just so we have that. And so now our references are set, and then we're going to go ahead and run this. And so we look at the game, and now we can see that it's moving. If we look in this top right corner, we see our position updating as we move, and we can move around in a circle. And so basically, that sums up on how you can get basic player movement. If you want to kind of change the camera, you can do that, and then you can kind of see more. We'll get more into that, but right now we're basically just looking at how to get player movement and how to move around. There's going to be more information to it, but this is just a basic understanding of creating a movement velocity vector. So let's jump into this again. And so what we kind of do is we are creating this movement velocity vector. We are calling movement in this update script, and then in the movement we are looking at whether or not you press W, S, D, or A, and we are translating that movement velocity and then applying this character controller.move and this coordinate.slurp to update the position of our character controller, which is called right here. And in that character controller, we have the references being called right here with this, and that actually updates it inside of our game. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll be back with more videos later on this, and we're going to complete an obstacle course.